This is the Resistance Report for March 23rd, 2017. Good evening. Lots of news tonight, but I again want to try to pull it together for you and give you a pattern, show you what is happening just under the surface. For example, not surprisingly, today House Republicans decided that they will not vote on the so-called repeal and replacement of the Affordable Care Act. You recall, they said they were going to vote today, and Donald Trump and Paul Ryan and others have spent a lot of the past several weeks trying to whip up the Republicans, get a majority in the House. No Democrat is going to vote for it, so that they had to make sure they kept every Republican. And there were about 21 Republicans who were wavering, maybe 24 Republicans who were wavering, and they didn't have the votes. And as I told you last night, they didn't want to have a vote. They would actually not have a vote if they knew that they did not have the votes to begin with. They're not going to risk a flaming defeat in the House of Representatives when so much is at stake, when the reputation of the president is at stake, when Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, has put his reputation at stake. And so if they counted noses, which they did this morning, and they didn't have enough votes, they just pulled it, and they are going to try again tomorrow. And if they don't have enough votes tomorrow, they're going to try again Monday. Now, meanwhile, as they count noses, as they count these votes, Trump and Ryan and a few other leaders of the House are sitting down with recalcitrant House Republican members and trying to figure out what they can give them to bring them around. Trump is threatening them. You can't really, as a president, you really can't threaten House members. It doesn't work very well when you say, you're going to be on my list, or I'm going to get you. That's what Trump apparently has said. They respond much better to cajoling, to being listened to feel that there are small changes or even sometimes substantial changes in the bill that are the result of what they want. Here is the problem strategically. There's something called the House Freedom Caucus. And that House Freedom Caucus is comprised of Republicans who are very, very conservative, who want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but do not want to replace it. And they feel that the bill that Paul Ryan and Republican leadership and Trump came up with, Trump Care, let's call it, Trump Care, is too much of a replacement. Now, this puts Trump in a slightly difficult position because, remember, throughout the campaign he said, we're going to repeal and replace it with something beautiful, something really beautiful. But you've got the House Freedom Caucus saying they want to repeal, but they don't really want much of a replacement at all. And so what's been happening is that Donald Trump and Paul Ryan have been trying to wheel and deal with the House Freedom Caucus, these conservative Republicans, and give them as much as is necessary to just get the number of votes they need, which means that they've been whittling away at the replacement part of the repeal and replace. As you know, the Congressional Budget Office last week came out with its estimate that said 24 million people are going to essentially lose their health insurance coverage under the bill that was then under consideration. Now, as Trump and Paul Ryan try to get the Freedom Caucus members on board, there will be even more than 24 million who are likely to lose their coverage because the coverage is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's particularly true of Medicaid, but it's true of all of the rest of the coverage. As the hard-right Republicans demand, in exchange for their votes, more and more concessions to make this less and less of a replacement and more only of a repeal, that means more and more people are going to lose their health care insurance coverage when the dust settles. But the irony is the dust is not going to settle because the Senate Republicans have a very different view of all of this. Now, this is where it gets interesting because House Republicans are only in charge of their one district. and their one district might be very wealthy Republicans who don't care, would much rather get a tax cut from all of this. Or they may be hard-right Trump Republicans who basically put ideology first and don't even care if they're going to lose out, which, as many of them will lose out if they lose their Medicaid and lose other provisions of the Affordable Health Care Act. But the senators, Republican senators, are in charge of an entire state. They have a lot of constituents who are going to be badly hurt. They have a lot of working-class people and poor people and lower middle-class people who they know are going to hold it against them, those senators, if they come up with something that is not much of a replacement at all for the Affordable Care Act. And so while the House members are pulling Trump and Ryan even further to the right, making this less and less and less of a replacement, hurting more and more people at the end, you've got Senate Republicans who want to pull in the opposite direction. The net result is chaos. It will be surprising if anything comes out, because the House and the Senate both have to agree on a bill. From Donald Trump's standpoint, the worst thing that can happen is he is a loser. You know how much he hates to be a loser? I mean, that is the worst thing in the world to Donald Trump. So if he gets this bill through the House, because he's made a lot of concessions, he and Paul Ryan have made a lot of concessions to the right-wing Republicans, and he doesn't get it through the Senate because he's made all these concessions, and the Republican senators are not going to vote with him, and it's much narrower in the Senate. He already has 4 Republican senators who say they're not going to be with him on this, and that's enough to kill it in the Senate. He could be defeated. Donald Trump could be a loser. It couldn't happen to a nicer, well, let me not say nicer. It couldn't happen to a more appropriate person. Let's put it that way. Donald Trump put all of his poker chips on this one particular set of cards that Paul Ryan put in front of him, and he was snookered. Snookered. We'll know more next week. By the way, I love this House Freedom Caucus. Every time you hear Republicans use the word freedom, watch your wallet. Because they're not talking about freedom in the way you and I and most other people talk about freedom. You know, if you have health insurance, you are freer than if you don't have health insurance, right? They're talking about freedom from what? From taxes, from government, from anything. So you're free to starve if you don't have any money. You're free to die if you can't afford health insurance. I suppose that's a form of freedom, right? Now, meanwhile, over in the Senate today, they are finishing or have finished their hearings on Neil Gorsuch to be the next Supreme Court justice. Donald Trump nominated him. And I want to give kudos right now to Charles Schumer. Chuck Schumer, who is the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer said this morning. He said, "I've concluded that I cannot support Judge Neil Gorsuch's nomination to the Supreme Court." Now, he also said something else. He said, "I will join a filibuster of Gorsuch's nomination. His nomination will have a cloture vote. It will need 60 votes for confirmation. I'm going to urge my colleagues to do the same as I will do." Now, here's what this means. The Republicans do not have enough votes in the Senate to get Gorsuch through the Senate. They only have about 52 votes. Democrats have 48 votes, but Democrats, that means, can hold up the nomination, because you need 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. And if Democrats stage a filibuster, essentially that is the end, unless, and here is the big question mark, unless Mitch McConnell decides that he's going to use the nuclear option. What is the nuclear option? He would hold a vote on the rules of the Senate. And that vote would be to change the Senate rules so that a Supreme Court justice can be confirmed with just 51 votes, and there is no right to filibuster. Now, that would be something new. Will Mitch McConnell use the nuclear option and prevent Democrats from filibustering Neil Gorsuch? He might, but if he does that, he is going to end up mobilizing even more Democrats and independents against the Republican Senate. Because to take away the Republican Senate's right even to filibuster, the Democrats' right even to filibuster, after having gone almost an entire year without acting on Barack Obama's nomination, his nominee for the Supreme Court, Merrick Garland, is going to strike a lot of people, not just Democrats, but a lot of independents and maybe even a few Republicans as the height of hypocrisy, arrogance, and anti-democratic. So the nuclear option is hugely risky for Mitch McConnell. Might still do it, but keep all of this in mind. Now I want to connect all of this, everything I've said so far, the House vote and what's going on in the Senate on Gorsuch, to a very basic question, which has arisen today in two forms, and it's about ethics. Ethics. Today, the General Services Administration, now this is the part of the government that owns government property, leases government property. This is the part of the government that leased the land and building that the Trump Organization rents to build the Trump International Hotel. Not to build it, but to refurbish that old post office building. One of the most beautiful buildings on Pennsylvania Avenue. I can't understand to this day why they let the Trump Organization lease it. But anyway, they did. But here's the thing. There was a clause put into this lease, a very important clause that you ought to know about. It said that no elected official of the government of the United States can derive any benefit from this lease. That clause was right in the government contract with Trump International Hotel. No official, elected official of the government of the United States can derive any benefit from this lease. Now, you would think, just common sense, would dictate that Donald Trump, as President of the United States, could not get any benefit from the lease. And so the way the Trump Organization is now organized, with Donald Trump still getting benefits, and certainly will be getting benefits when the hotel is ever sold, that is just violation of the lease. You would think that Donald Trump would have to actually put his assets, including his portion of the hotel, he has about a 77% stake in the hotel, into a independent kind of special place that is overseen by an independent person. But no, Donald Trump wanted to keep his stake. So there was a big question mark about what the General Service Administration would do. Would they find this lease to be violated? Today, the project's contracting officer, a man named Kevin Terry, he found that Donald Trump receives no direct proceeds from the hotel during his term of office, and therefore the lease is not violated. Do you follow me? Remember, the lease says that no elected official of the government of the United States shall derive any benefit from this particular hotel. Today, the GSA, in this complicated, contorted way of interpreting this, said Donald Trump, because he's not going to receive a direct benefit, a direct proceed, money is not going to be handed to him while he's president during his term of office that it's okay. This is bonkers, friends. This is a nutso reading. I don't know who this Kevin Terry is. I'm not going to suggest that there was any payoff. That would be unfair to him. But how do you explain this? I mean, Trump is still the owner of the hotel. The hotel profits will ultimately accrue to Trump. Those profits will be presumably reinvested in the hotel. The hotel becomes more valuable. The hotel, then Trump ends his presidency. The hotel is sold. He gets much more money. That is a big benefit for Donald Trump. The underlying conflict of interest here even goes beyond the lease. I mean, here we have Donald Trump is appointing the head of the General Services Administration. It is under Trump. This lease is under Trump's aegis as President of the United States. We've never seen an ethics problem like this, an ethics violation like this. This is huge. This is the most ethically challenged administration since the presidency of Warren G. Harding. Do you remember Warren G. Harding? Remember the Teapot Dome scandal? And believe me, there will be scandals. There are going to be, in fact, already are huge numbers of scandals. Take this one. Wilbur Ross. He is the Secretary of Commerce, Trump's pick for Secretary of Commerce. When he signed on to be Trump's Secretary of Commerce, and he would be playing a key role in trade policy. That's what the Secretary of Commerce does. One of his major responsibilities, or her major responsibilities, whomever the Secretary of Commerce is trade policy. Now, he agreed, Wilbur Ross, to divest millions of dollars in assets, put it into the kind of blind trust that Donald Trump never did. But one asset Wilbur Ross has kept, didn't put it into a blind trust, wanted to keep it, is his stake in something called the Diamond S Shipping Group. Now, why, you may ask, is this an ethics problem? Let me count the ways. Number one, remember, the Commerce Secretary has a lot of say over trade policy. Diamond S Shipping is one of the world's largest owners and operators of tanker vessels. You know, big cargo ships, which crisscross the globe as kind of crucial cogs in the whole worldwide trading system. So there you have the Secretary of Commerce who's sitting on a stake, has a stake in one of the world's largest cargo ships, and he's making trade policy. Conflict of interest? Maybe, but that doesn't end it. The vessels of the Diamond S Shipping Company travel under Chinese flags. They travel under Chinese flags for legal purposes, to avoid taxes. The company has ties to a major Chinese investment fund. Now, Donald Trump talks all the time about putting America first. Rubbish. His Secretary of Commerce has a stake in a major firm that is a global shipping firm that travels under Chinese flags. And thirdly, according to its filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission, Diamond S Shipping travels to, quote, ports located in countries subject to sanctions and embargoes imposed by the U.S. government and countries identified as state sponsors of terrorism, such as Cuba, Iran, Sudan, and Syria. So you have a Secretary of Commerce that has huge responsibility for trade, including trade embargoes, including trade policy, and he has a stake, a major stake in a shipping company, global cargo shipping company, that is not only traveling under Chinese flags, but is going to all of these places where there is state-sponsored terrorism. There's something else, by the way. One of Diamond S Shipping's main customers recently acquired a stake in a Russian national oil company. Do you see how completely blind these people are? Or indifferent? They are just indifferent to ethics. Ross says he doesn't believe that the shipping investment presents a conflict of interest. That is rubbish. Richard Painter, who was the chief ethics officer under George W. Bush administration, he says that shipping company is going to be a big problem with respect to Ross being involved with trade under the conflict of interest statutes. He says that. This is Bush's conflicts of interest ethics officer. I mean, we've got Donald Trump. We've got Ivanka Trump. We've got Jared Kushner. We've got Betsy DeVos. And now we have Wilbur Ross. And all of them are using their government positions, or in the position to use their government positions to rake in the money. Ethics, that word, is a word that this administration simply does not understand. Now, some of you may be saying to yourself, well, why aren't these ethics violations? Why is Congress allowing this to occur? The answer, my friends, is that Congress is under the control of the Republican Party. The Republican Party is not going to do anything that upsets the people who now are in the executive branch and run the executive branch. Now, I wanted to answer your questions tonight, but you know something? I'm going to do something a little bit different. Because Donald Trump was interviewed by Time magazine. Came out today, this interview. And it was the most chilling interview I have ever read or seen. I just want to give you some little examples. I don't want to keep you long, but I want to give you a few examples. The interview said, "Mr. President, thank you for taking the time." This is at the start of the interview. And Donald Trump says, "Absolutely. How have you been, okay?" "Yeah, it's been a wild couple of months. You keep busy," said the interviewer. "Yeah, it's been good, though. It's been good," said Trump. The interviewer says, "Do you want me to give you a quick overview of the story I'm going to write?" And then Trump says, "Yeah, it's a cool story. I mean, it's the concept, right? I mean, I predicted a lot of things. Some things that came to you a little bit later, but you know, we just rolled out a list. Sweden, I make the statement. Everyone goes crazy. The next day they have a massive riot and death and problems. Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner. You know what I tweeted about that whole deal, and then it turned out he had it, all of Hillary's email and on this thing. NATO, obsolete because it doesn't cover terrorism. They fixed that. And I said that the Allies must pay. Nobody knew that they weren't paying. I did. I figured it. Brexit, I was totally right about that. You were over there, I think, when I predicted that, right? The day before Brussels. I said Brussels is not Brussels. I mean, other things, many other things. The election's rigged against Bernie Sanders. We have a lot of things." I just quoted verbatim the President of the United States. Does he sound coherent to you? Does he sound like he's on something? The interviewer then asks him about the testimony concerning Donald Trump's tweet with regard to Barack Obama. Barack Obama allegedly wiretapping Donald Trump. Here's what Donald Trump says. Now remember this. When I said wiretapping, it was in quotes, because a wiretapping is, you know, today it's different than wiretapping. It's just a good description. But wiretapping was in quotes. What I'm talking about is surveillance. And today, Devin Nunes just had a news conference. Now, probably got obliterated by what's happened in London, but just had a news conference. And here it is, one of those things. The one thing, the election, I said we're going to win. We won, and many other things. And I think this is going to be very interesting. This is the President of the United States. He is the most powerful man in the world. What's he on? Then there's another question. The interviewer says, Do you have any evidence to back up your tweet about President Obama? And this is the response from Donald Trump. Well, he just got this information. This was new information. That was just got. Members of, let's see, were under surveillance during the Obama administration following November's election. Wow, this just came out. So, just came out. Now, I have articles saying it happened, but you have to look at what they just went out at a news conference. Devin Nunes had a new news conference. I mean, I don't know. I was unable to see it because I am at meetings, but they just had a news conference talking about surveillance. Now, again, it is in quotes. That means surveillance and various other things. And the New York Times had a front page story, which they actually reduced. They took it, the word tapping, wiretapping out of the title. But its first story in the front page of the paper was wiretapping, and a lot of information just has been learned. And a lot of information may be learned over the next coming period of time. We will see what happens. Look, I predicted a lot of things that took a little bit of time. Here, headline for the front page of the New York Times. Wiretap data used in inquiry of Trump aides. That's the headline. Now, they dropped that headline. I never saw it until this morning. Then they dropped that headline. They used another headline without the word wiretap, but they did mean wiretap. Wiretap data used in inquiry. Then changed after that. They probably didn't like it, and they changed the title. They took the wiretap word out. What is going on with this man? Do you want me to go on? I don't think I will. But take a look at this extraordinary interview. Donald Trump, President of the United States, is unhinged. We've got a big problem, folks. And it's not a problem just for Democrats. It's a problem for the United States. Either by impeachment or by the 25th Amendment, he has got to go. That's the end of tonight's Resistance Report. I will see you tomorrow.